In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Pray that you're all doing well and having a great week. So we decided to, we started a new series last week called Divine Dilemmas, and the focus has been on these paradoxical thoughts about faith. And when I say that, what I mean is these contradictions that we're dealing with when we talk about our relationship with God. And we've named a few of them. And if you've seen the flyer, you've seen what we're dealing with. And so last week we talked about freedom and captivity, and how for so many of us, we think that our freedom is in our choices and that we get to do whatever we want. But what we said last week is that when we are captive of the flesh, that means we are free of hope, because we exhaust our resources. We exhaust them, and we are disappointed by the outcomes. And when we are captive of Christ, we are free of despair. We're free of despair because we have always gone to the life giver who never fails to have an answer. Okay? And so this week we're going to pivot and we're going to talk about courage in the insurmountable. Courage in the insurmountable. And I was thinking about courage and what it means to be brave. And as I usually have, I have a story, because I have an unbelievable son that never ceases to amaze me. So Isaac, All Saints' Day is coming up in a few weeks, and we're asking Isaac what he wants to dress up as. And Isaac says, I want to be David. I'm like, okay, cool, you want to be David. Finally, so we pivoted, we got away from Goliath. So I was like, this is fantastic. Okay? He goes, I want to be David, and I'm going to get a slingshot. And Daddy's going to be Goliath, and I'm going to bust him in the head. And I'm like, and here we are again. And I was looking at Mare, and Tassone and I kind of laughed, and we're like, you know what courage really is sometimes? Irrational confidence. It's irrational confidence. If by some chance he hit me in the head, it would be the last time anybody would see him. But that's only because I'd send him off to boarding school, of course. Anyway. So I thought about this, and courage really is irrational confidence. It really is. When we talk about irrational confidence is only irrational depending on who you're confident in, right? When we talk about being Christians who have faith and are courageous, one of the things we have to remember is that we are irrationally confident that no matter how bad things get, who's in control? Who's in control? Guys, not a smart person, don't ask smart questions. Who's in control? God, right? There we go, God. God is in control. Our Lord is always and ever present in every storm. And so the reason that we have courage in the insurmountable is that we have an irrational confidence in a Creator who can step up in any situation, who is unshakable. When is that irrational confidence unhealthy? When it's in yourself. When it's in yourself. When my irrational confidence is, God, hold my beer, I've got this. Famous last words, okay? Famous last words. Not from my priesthood. I've done it 4 times. But my point is, many of us, we become irrationally confident in ourselves. What do we become confident in? Our abilities. We become confident in our ability to control a scenario because of our skills, our wits, our mind. Now, do you have a part to play when it comes to your life? You're darn right you do. You lie down and wait for God to work, you'll be waiting for a long time. So you have a responsibility to work, as I do. But when we talk about having courage in the insurmountable, it's courage to believe that God is in control in every scenario. And that's going to be the highlight of everything we talk about tonight. God is in control of every scenario. Well, what does that mean, Abuna? Duh. No, let's be clear. That means God's in the middle of you getting rejected from school. God's in the middle of you losing a loved one. God's in the middle of a terrible breakup. God is in the middle of getting fired at work. God's in the middle of an illness. God's in the middle of a vice that you're battling with. God's in the middle of all of it. He never leaves. Never leaves. And so what we're going to meditate on by the grace of God today is how we can have courage in the insurmountable. We can have courage in the insurmountable. And 3 points as usual. The first way that we have courage in the insurmountable is acknowledgement. Going back to Isaac, can I ask a question? Yes. Who? Mary is on today. That's my girl. One of one. Don't ever change. All right. How tall do you think, if you've never met my son, how tall do you think he is? How tall? 2 feet. Likely 2 feet. I'm going to go 2.5 because this weekend he was running and managed to clock his head on the island. So he's getting taller and still more clumsy. But anyway, he's about 2.5 feet tall, okay? Now, obviously, I'm not going to have you guys all make fun of me and my height, but is it fair to say that I am significantly bigger than Isaac? Significantly, yes, yes, okay. If this is a hard concept, get out, okay? There's a couple of awkward breaths in the front up here. I'm like, what's going on? What are we doing? Come on now, come on now. Anyway, it stands to reason that I'm probably bigger than my son. It stands to reason. And yet, if I tell him, you realize you're not going to be able to hit me with this. No, I'm going to do it. That would be the argument for 10 minutes. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And then he would get his pretend slingshot, which is a pillow, by the way, for anyone wondering. We don't give 2-year-old slingshots. And he would throw it at, he would miss. What's wrong with Isaac's strategy outside of his aim? What's wrong with the strategy? He's not thinking logically. Why is that a problem? He's a dreamer, right? Hopes and dreams, believes he can do anything. Take out his dad with a rock in the head, right? Isn't that a good thing? For a life insurance policy, yes, but no. What's the issue with that? What's the issue? Because things, go ahead. He can't take steps toward his goal. If you do not acknowledge the reality of what is insurmountable in your life, you will not overcome it. We talk about courage as though I'm going to go fight everything and take over everything and beat everything. That's not courage. That's foolishness. That's foolishness. The insurmountable is indeed insurmountable. Bad news for you. Somebody walks away from you in a relationship, you're probably not getting back together with them. And if you do, it's not going to be healthy because there's going to be a lack of trust between the two of you. But Abuna, if I change this about myself, maybe if I get taller, maybe if I pray more, maybe if I stop this vice, then I can fix it. Sure, you might be able to fix it. But what's the probability? It ain't working. There's a divide, lack of trust. Why? That's an insurmountable mountain. What do you think about that mountain? No, I can get up on it. I can take care of it. I can stop it. One of the worst things I hear sometimes, I want to go explain myself to this person. It's over. What are you explaining? What are you explaining? It's done. It's dead. Why are you going to kick in the face again? Why are you going to humiliate yourself? If that person has a change of heart, have a conversation. I want closure. Abid closure. Give me a break with this word. I'm so tired of it. Ain't no closure in more rejection, my brothers and sisters. No closure in more rejection. Just more pain. Okay? We see these insurmountable obstacles, and we say, you know what? I'm going to get over this. I'm not Batman today, but I've got a grappling hook. I'm going to try. And then you fall on your face. That's not bravery. That's foolishness. We have to acknowledge the insurmountable. We have to acknowledge in our lives what we cannot change on our own. You cannot beat lust on your own. You cannot make someone love you on your own. You cannot force someone to give you a job on your own. I'm not saying God's going to do those things. But when you put these things in God's hands, what are you doing? You are acknowledging your frailty and acknowledging God's power. That is bravery. Bravery is knowing that if I go to a fight that I can't win, I don't hope I get lucky. I'm going to go with a probability. My goal is to achieve inevitability, that I will accomplish what I want to accomplish. And that only happens when I acknowledge I can't do it alone. And this is the first step to being a brave person. The first step to being a brave person is being a humble person. And I'm going to tell you something, guys. We're all young. Me just like you, Asha and Shabab, right? So corny. I'm sorry. Anyway, we're all young, and we have this crazy confidence in ourselves that we can do anything, and we're told we can do anything. It's not wrong. But there's also a likelihood that things don't work out the way you want. When you are married to the way your story is written, guess what? That's not bravery to force it to happen. That's trying to make God your slave. And that never works. Never works. We get let down and let down and let down. But it's because we have not acknowledged God's part in our work. I tell you guys this prayer many times, and I'll tell you again. When you pray for things that you want to happen in your life, tell God what you want, and then ask God to do what He wills. God, this is what I want. This is what, let it be what you will. That is how you are brave, because you have the courage to acknowledge that whatever I want may not be good enough for me. So I need you to do your part. I have to acknowledge my vulnerability. I might not be able to get this done alone. I see this a lot of times with people who are battling with deep family problems too. And they're trying to fix everything in their home. Guys, it's not your job to fix the problems of your home. It's not. Are you a part of it? Yeah. But look, I told somebody a few months ago, you're trying to stop mom and dad from doing this, and they've been doing this for you in the womb. Give me a break. You're going to stop it? Who do you think you are? What kind of irrational confidence is this? But when you lay this on the Lord of hosts, when you tell Him, I can't, but you can. I hope, but you will hold me accountable and hold everyone accountable. When you do this work, this changes your life. Because now you're acknowledging you need a partner in the pursuit of perfection. A partner in the pursuit of peace, prosperity in your life. We have to acknowledge that we fall short more often than not when we're alone. When we leave this out of the equation, we stumble and stumble often. What is the paradox? Is that the world tells you that courage is to do what nobody's ever done before, to blaze a trail, and then to flex about it later. Guys, the more you talk about your accomplishments, the more you will meet people who have done more. Our guy, King Saul, my dude, love King Saul. King Saul was killing it for a hot minute, right? And then all of a sudden panicked on God, freaked out on God. Goliath shows up. And when they come home from all of the wars, what do the people say? Saul has slain his thousands. David has slain tens of thousands. And what happened? Now that confidence is shaken. Why? There's always someone better. There will always be someone in your world that's more talented that can do more. But the second, and if it's all on you, that's what's going to eat you up inside. But when it's all on God, it's like, God, I'm acknowledging this is as far as I can go. You have a part to play if this story is going to play out. This is the first step to being brave. is realizing that we are weak and that God is strong. And it's because, by the way, in case you're wondering, you know what's the most insurmountable thing you're battling that you don't even see? It's the principalities and the spiritual warfare that you're in. Can you make the devil stop attacking you? No. No, you can't. Can you make some of these things that seem crazy stop happening? No, you can't. That is why St. Anthony the Great would say, I am weaker than your weakest to the devils. And as Abuna told us a few months ago, the devil can replicate us in everything, but he cannot replicate us in humility. So it is our humility, which is the acknowledgement of our frailty, that begins our fight for courage. We become brave when we realize we need an army, not just a soldier. Ain't none of y'all Captain America, okay? So, okay, in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 3 through 5. It says, for though we walk in the flesh, we do not war against the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God for pulling down strongholds, casting down arguments and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. So it starts with, we are not fighting according to the flesh. There's something bigger that we're fighting against. And the whole point is, it is about God in that fight that transforms us. It's about God. So what's the practical point here we take away? Let us acknowledge our weakness. When you are in prayer, when you are beginning a new journey in your life, start it with God. I don't know how this is going to go, but I know I can't do it without you. You know, there's actually a prayer in the Agbeya for that. It's the prayer for God's accompaniment, if you ever want it. It's in the back of your Agbeya in the prayers. Putting things on God before they start ensures God finishes them. Putting things on God's back before they start ensures that God finishes them. Okay? The first thing that we do to have courage in the insurmountable is we acknowledge our weakness. The second thing that we do is we put in effort. This is the one that always makes me laugh. Actually, the whole thing's funny, to be honest, but effort. When I sit down with people sometimes and they talk to me about a problem, I ask a lot of very simple questions because I'm not a very smart person. Most of the time I ask a question, are you praying about this issue? Yes, Abuna, I've been praying. Okay, cool. Are you reading your Bible? Nah, not as much. Okay. When's the last time you confessed? Well, okay. So what lifestyle changes are you making to hear God's voice? Well, I'm eating more ice cream. Okay. Is this helping you or harming you? The funny thing about effort is, all of us believe we're putting in the work. But when you work in a job, you work in your studies, you know where the answers come up as to whether or not you're working? Your outcomes. Your outcomes. My boss used to tell me all the time, never, young man, mistake activity for achievement. Never mistake activity for achievement. You could be sitting there working for hours, and if it took you all that time to do one math problem, I would consider a different career. That's the point. Activity without achievement is nothing. But in God, it's actually flipped. God doesn't need you to achieve. He just needs you to be active. That's it. Show up. How many people talk about the work and know what to do, but when it comes to doing the work, meh. You know what courage is? Courage is will. Courage is will. It's will. The number one thing that we are lacking in this generation is the will. Why? Because everything can be ChatGPT'd, everything can be Googled, everything is instant gratification. Tap twice and you get a like, find you in the DM, snap you here, TikTok you there. What's going on? Everything is right away, right away, right away, right away. And what we're doing is conditioning our minds to have less of a desire to fight. Why is it anxiety is increasing in the world? less of a desire to fight. And yes, social media plays a big role in that. The concern that I have when it comes to courage is you're not brave because you know the answer. But many of us believe that we're brave because we're sitting on the sidelines in the fight. That doesn't make you courageous. All it does is make you an eyewitness to falling short. Like all of those Israelites who were there when Goliath was there. Front row seat, got their swords. But when it came to that, nope, I noped right out of there. Not doing that one. Hard pass. The work was too much. Is the work too much in your life? Let's take a minute here and think. If you screen timed yourself and you thought about how many hours you were on social media and in your texts and selfie this and live stream that, how many times you're kicking it with your friends, how many times you're binging movies, and you ask yourself, compare that time to my Bible reading, to my prayer, to my quiet time, to my confessions, being at liturgy on time. Do the numbers add up? Man, Abuna's beating us down today. No. I'm pointing out a flaw. There's nothing wrong with you, my brothers and sisters. All of you are capable. There's nothing wrong with you. The question is, do you want to win the fight or not? God is the one that wins these fights. But if we are not willing to punch with him, we're going to be disappointed. We're going to be disappointed. When I hear people talk about wanting to fight for a relationship, fight for a friendship, fight with a lust or a battle with a vice, keep coming back to the same stuff. Are you doing anything different? I've said this before. Everything stays the same if nothing changes. Everything stays the same if nothing changes. In the book of Genesis, actually, there's something important I want to share with you that people don't realize. Do you know that hard work is part of the life of a Christian? In Genesis chapter 3, after the Lord lovingly escorts Adam out of the garden, he then says to him, because you've heeded the voice of your wife and have eaten from the tree of which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat, curses the ground for your sake. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. In toil. Work is the life of a Christian. Your life is not meant for laziness. In laziness is fear. Many times the reason that we cannot continue in our battle, that we cannot overcome a weakness or a vice, is that our effort is not consistent. What does that mean we have to do? How do you eat an elephant? Anybody have an idea? Anybody ever try to eat an elephant? I'm just wondering what it tastes like. No, I'm kidding. So listen. I was told by my boss again, this guy's amazing. He always drops these bombs on me. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. One bite at a time. Don't look at, oh man, if I'm going to stop this sin or I'm going to get ready for a relationship, it's going to take 7 months of hardcore. No. It's going to take tomorrow being great. At the end of tomorrow, looking at it and say, okay, what did I do today? What can I do tomorrow? It is about a daily work. Every day, setting goals for yourself and being faithful to them. Does that mean that you're not going to fall short? No, you will. But when we're reaching, God is reaching. God is always reaching for us. But when we're reaching back, that's when our hands touch. Do you think Christ would have put his hand in the water to get Peter? I don't know. You imagine if Peter's story was, and he drowned because he didn't try. Pretty lame story. Peter reached for Christ. We have to reach. If there is a sin that you are battling with, you should be talking about it with your father of confession. If you have a spiritual rule in your life, stick to it, or at least try. One of the things that drives me crazy when everyone's like, well, okay, Abuna, I'm ready. I'm going to change my life. Okay, cool. Well, let's set a plan. Okay, I've got my plan, Abuna. How often do you read your Bible right now? Oh, I read my Bible like once every never. Okay, cool. So I'm going to read it 5 days a week. I'm going to read 3 chapters every day, and I'm going to fast, and I'm going to do matanyas, and I'm going to be 3 liturgies a week. And then what happens? Week 1, you kill it. Everything worked. You're so proud of yourself. Look at me. Ah! Week 2, you're like, I guess it's okay if I skip 1. But that's my rule. So is that okay? I don't know. And then the next week, you do less. And you're like, did I undo all my progress? Well, I guess I worked hard enough for a little while. Maybe this is too hard. Welcome to the insurmountable. It becomes insurmountable when the effort is not sustainable. I don't need you to do an about face and change your life overnight. That's not how it works, guys. It's not like Oprah showing up giving you a check, man. Calm down. Get it together. It's about steady gains. When you go to the gym, it's steady gains. You take time to grow, to drop weight, to see muscle. Why are we willing to wait for that? But to wait for me to get over lust? No way. To restrain myself from getting into another unhealthy relationship? No way. To not say what I want to say? No way. We don't have courage if we don't have effort. We got to show up so God can show out. God works in our faithfulness. We are brave when we try, not when we lie down. So it's our job to do the work. It's our job to do the work. Most problems are going to be bigger than you. And that's okay. Because your God's bigger than most problems. And by most, I mean all. In the book of Sirach, chapter 40, it says, a great occupation was created for all men, and a heavy yoke is upon the sons of Adam, from the day of their departure from their mother's womb, even until the day of their burial into the mother of all. There is little or no rest, and sleep is taken from him, as if on a day of keeping watch. He is disturbed by a vision of his heart, as if he had escaped in a day of warfare. In the time of salvation, he rose up and wondered that there was no fear. This is how it works, guys. This is the power of depending on God steadily in your life. When we put this work in with God steadily, in the beginning it seems daunting, and you don't think you've made progress. Abuna, I fell again, and I fell again, and I was thinking, are you trying? Are you getting back up? Yes, then hang in. And eventually, there's nothing to fear. This beast, you have whittled it down, not because you were perfect, but because you were faithful. If you are not perfect, but a participant in the work, then God's perfection always outweighs our imperfection. That is courage. To do the work, even if you don't see the results. To do the work, even if the problem is bigger than you. So the first way that we have the courage to deal with the insurmountable is acknowledgement. The next is effort. And the last one, openness. If you don't hear anything I say tonight, it needs to be this, okay? And I'll do it with a story again, with our guy. So, sometimes when we put Isaac to bed, Isaac wants a very, very specific order of things. He needs to read a book, pray, but when you pray, everything has to be out of the bed. So you have to get his pillow, his blankets, his teddy bear. They all have to be next to him when he prays outside. Then, when you put him back in, you have to finish the song. He knows when the song ends. And then, when you cover him, there is an order to the covers. Black blanket, white blanket, teddy bear. So, I was tired one night, and I was not feeling this. I was like, we gotta go. So, blitzing through the story. I'm praying, Daddy, Daddy, Daddy. I'm like, hang on, I'm going to pray. Daddy, Daddy, Daddy. We're praying. Daddy, oh, I'm praying. There's an argument in the prayer. God heard nothing, okay? So, yeah, he knows my heart, whatever. Anyway, so we put him in the bed, Put the blankets on. I was like, the blankets are going however they're going. It's a yelling match, shouting, crying. I walk out of the room. I think I won. Mary's like, what are you doing? I'm like, he needs to be flexible. And she's like, or you could just be open to what, okay, fine, whatever. So anyway, I go back in. Of course, I lose. And you know what he says? He says, yeah, that's right. I don't think he meant it that way, but that's how it came out. You know, when you put the bear in his face. But when I think about Isaac, Isaac's all of us when it comes to being with God. We are so inflexible with God. And we think our inflexibility is courageousness. I'm being brave because I'm going to die on this hill. It has to be this person. It has to be this job. It has to be this friend group. It has to be. And we think we're brave. I'll tell you something, guys. Again, the difference between bravery and foolishness is wisdom. And wisdom comes in humility. Openness is the path to being brave. You know why? You believe someone else is in control. And what do we say at the beginning? You got to have the premise that God is in control. If we are not open to God's plan, well, then we're going to have a hard time with God. How many of us need to go through suffering after suffering because of stubbornness after stubbornness? And that's one of the things that worries me about us. Because we are irrationally confident, we tell God we know better. And we call it bravery. It is foolishness. It is foolishness. Our openness to God's hand in our lives is what gives us a path. How do I know if I'm open, Abuna? Do you take direction or not? If everybody gives you advice and you do what you want, are you open or are you closed for business? You are closed. You have one master, it is you. Doesn't work. Yes, sometimes Abuna is lame. Sorry. Sometimes your parents are your parents. Sorry. But your friends are your friends. Your parents are your parents. Abuna's Abuna. My boss is my boss. Anybody seen a pattern? The repetition of me being right guarantees I will not be happy. But now I'm going to ask a hard question. Why do you think we're inflexible? Why? Potentially. Anybody else? Part of it? I'm going to tell you something. Go ahead. This is my belief. A big reason why we are inflexible is we are afraid. We are afraid. We fear that if it's not our way, we're not going to be happy. We're not going to be served. We're not going to find joy. That's what we're afraid of. When it comes to living a chaste life or a pure life, we think, well, that means I'm never going to meet somebody because everybody's broken in the world. Why try? Sometimes it means I need to lie like everybody else. I need to cheat like everybody else because only to get ahead. I have to speak up for myself because if I don't speak, then no one will. There's a time for that, of course. But the general premise of being so afraid to depend on God, so afraid. The only time that we are open to God's plan is when ours burns up in front of us. Why? Because we don't have another option. We don't have another option. We are so shaken by things not working our way that we drop to our knees and say, God, it's yours. Enough is enough. You are not brave because you are stubborn. You are stubborn because you are stubborn. Let us have a bendable spirit. Now, I'm going to be clear. Does this mean that we listen to everybody's advice? I've already talked about the Council of Nicaea, okay? You don't have a Council of Nicaea in your life, I promise. You don't. Homie this person, Captain Falafel that. You don't have that, all right? But you have to have 1 to 2 spiritual guides in your life that you will listen to. 1 to 2 mentors in your life that you will listen to. You have to give people the opportunity to guide you. There are parents who are like, there are 1 to 2 parents that you need to maybe 1. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, my point is, we've got to have openness. We've got to have openness to God's plan. When you are brave, you give God your hand. You don't tell God to talk to the hand. Is that still a thing? Talk to the hand? No, not a thing, right? Okay. It wasn't really a thing when we were young either, but I still wanted to say. I don't know, maybe it made a comeback. Everything else does. We'll wait for that boomerang another 5 years. Your kids are going to do it to you. Watch. Okay. Anyway. When we make the mistake of insisting on our path, we're not brave. But bravery is saying, God, take my hand. You know what's best for me. I'm going to do everything I can, and I acknowledge that I'm going to fall short. But I have to be amenable to what you have in store for me. Just break my will. In Ezekiel, he talks about, give me a heart of flesh, not a heart of stone. A heart of flesh. This is our life. Don't insist on your path. The only time I will tell you it's okay to be stubborn is when it's holding on to Christ. That is it. The only time I will tell you to be stubborn, holding on to Christ. That's when you're stubborn. That's when it's non-negotiable. When we make these choices in our lives to be open, God can show us so much of what He has in store. This insurmountable mountain in front of you, it has to be this person, and it doesn't work. You want to cry, but when you give God your hand, you know that He walks you somewhere else, and He shows you a path. This terrible situation at work seems insurmountable. You put it in His hands, walks you on a path. Time after time after time, I've seen it. All of us can think of people like this. I remember a story I heard once about a very famous immunologist. And he was working on a drug, and they were going through the FDA process of getting the drug approved. And a couple of the scientists were telling him, this is the only way that we are going to get this drug passed. We have to ignore this test or this trial, because these are enough. This is the whole thing. And the person was listening, said, you could be right. Is there any other way? It's like, we need to submit so we can have our meeting. We need to submit. He's like, no. We'll take 2 weeks. This man takes 2 weeks in prayer. God, is this it? Is this it? Is this it? Is this it? In that time, he did some work. He ran the data again. Another trial. And what he found was that actually the way the data was aggregated the first time was incorrect. And so because he waited, he didn't have to cheat. He didn't have to lie. He didn't have to do something that he wasn't sure of. He was open to what God had in store for him. And sure enough, the right door opened, and it was the same one. When we are open, sometimes our door and God's door are the same. But when we are closed, then it's only our door, irrespective of what God intends. Our bravery is in letting God show us what comes next, instead of telling him what should. So St. Augustine tells us something beautiful about this. He says, Temperance or moderation is love surrendering itself completely to him who is its object. Courage is love bearing all things gladly for the sake of him who is its object. And so what St. Augustine is teaching us is that love for God is why we are open. When you love him, when you trust him, when you believe that he sees what you can't, you will walk away from what is toxic. You will listen to people who you know love you and you know will guide you in a righteous, godly path. You will bend. And when you bend, you will not be broken. You will be rebuilt. That is courage. Everybody can be brave when they've got everything. But when you give God everything, that's when you are brave. To sum it up, the three ways that courage in the face of the insurmountable. Let us acknowledge our weakness, that we can't do it without him. Number 2, put in the effort. Show up to work every day. Be faithful. Don't worry about being fruitful. Don't worry about the results. Worry about the work. Okay? And lastly, be open. Lord, this is what I want. Let it be what you will. And in the meantime, help me be still. Glory be to God forever and ever. Amen. Questions, comments, concerns? Yep.
With God, it's about the result. It's not about the results. It's as much as the process more than the results, because the results are ultimately God's. The war is God's. The fight is God's. The win is God's. And the losses, you can give them to God just as well.
It's all his, absolutely. Anybody else? Questions? Yes.
Yeah, so I had a question. You sort of talk about how a lot of the impulse is derived from fear. And I don't know, I was sort of working through that, but I can think of counterexamples where it might be of the flesh or something along those other lines that's talked about, like in the Garden of Eden. So I don't know if you could flesh out that, the fear a bit more.
So when we talk about the fear, so the whole question is, fear, how does fear motivate us to seek more control? One of the number one motivators in life is fear of loss. Fear of loss, okay? If I keep using the relationship example, but it's easy. If I lose this person, I'm never going to get married because this is the only person for me. If I lose this job, I'll never have a better job than this. If I lose this person, I'll never be happy again. It's this fear of loss that makes us inflexible. And the psychology of that is it's rooted also in pride. Fear and pride go hand in hand, right? I think that's where you were going and where some of the group was going here. I just wanted to highlight fear for an important reason. We don't think we're afraid. We think we're just confident. But so much of it is rooted in the fear of loss. My brothers and sisters, you do not lose when you reach for Christ. You do not lose. You will always gain. What you gain is what God needs you to have. And that's the difference. Anybody else? Questions, comments, concerns? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so mine is more when you give your trust to God and you let him take the wheel and you tell him, okay, you tell me what I need to do. How do you discern what God will do for you versus what he wants you to do, what he needs you to decide that you need to do this?
Great question. So St. Augustine kind of gives us this answer very clearly. Work as though everything depends on you. Pray as though everything depends on God. So when we talk about depending on God and letting him work, we're still doing all the stuff we can, right? We're taking direction from our spiritual guide or our father of confession. We're doing all of the spiritual canon. We're making righteous choices. And then we're making good choices for our work, whatever it is that we're thinking about or struggling with. We have to do all the things to sober the mind. And this is the key when it comes to hearing God's voice. You cannot hear God's voice if your heart is not sober. If it's not sober. And you know what that means. If you are indulging in the flesh, that doesn't mean falling. Everybody falls. But indulging in the flesh, not wanting to change, not trying to change, not resisting by not repenting, then you're going to be drunk on your flesh. If we are not keeping up with our prayer and our reading, it doesn't mean you forgot one day or you're tired one day, but that you got up and tried again. You become drunk. All of this slowly makes you inebriated in the Spirit. And then you can't hear Him. That's the challenge. So we have all this work to do to continue in this path. And it's about being faithful, not being perfect, not being fruitful, being faithful. Okay? And when you're faithful, God, He will speak in the right season. There are people that I've heard, and I tell people who this happens to, you're so lucky, where they start doing something for like a week, and all of a sudden they get an answer. And those people, I hate you all, because I wish that happened to me. I didn't get any one of those. And then there are people who wait years. You know one of the things we say in Luke 1, when we read Luke 1 and we read about Zacharias and Elizabeth, is that they were blameless. Does that mean they never argued? They never sinned? No, they did. But they were blameless, and that they kept being faithful. And it took their entire life to see John. Their whole life. But what did God do? And this is the beauty of how God works when we're waiting for an answer, is that if we're doing all the work to know Him, He is sustaining us, sustaining us, sustaining us in the seasons of shallowness. You guys, you know this is true. If you have committed to God in a season, when you are waiting for Him to deliver you, He sustains you. You know that by asking, how did I get up again? How did I do this again? How did I forgive this person? How did I resist going to this party? How did I stop? How did I not? How did I not? That's not you, bro. That's God activated in you. Work as though it depends on you. Pray as though it depends on God. That answer your question? Anyone else? Going once? Going twice? Ah, okay. There it is.
So does God treat us differently when we reach out to Him as a last resort? Like you just mentioned Zacharias, like Zacharias didn't believe that he was going to give birth, made him mute. Like does He put things in our way until we, you know?
That's a really good question. So I think to answer what you're saying, I don't believe that God punishes you for not running to Him. It's just harder for you to discern His will. That's it. It's harder for you to see God's hand in things. Zacharias probably struggled many years with the idea of being barren. It's an embarrassment. You're going to wrestle with stuff, even if you're doing it all right. But your ability to endure in that season is how you know God is working in your faithfulness, right? Now, the other part of that is God is a very loving God above all. Okay? He will not hide from you anything that you do not hide from yourself. I hope you heard that. He will not hide from you anything that you don't hide from yourself. When we hide things from ourselves. We hide it from ourselves, not on purpose. It's like when you put down your phone on the couch, and then you walk away and then you can't find it. We get frustrated. Where's my phone? Did you take my phone? Did you? No, it's you, dummy. You put the thing on the couch and sat and it fell in there. That's your fault. God doesn't hide stuff from us. God is waiting and yearning. He said it to the Pharisees. He's like, how many times did I yearn to bring you under my wings like a mother hen over her chicks, but you would not listen. Guys, God doesn't want to play hide and seek with you. Okay? That's not His game. God's not hiding in some secret box. He's in the same freaking place every freaking time. We're the problem. You imagine, we're saying, I'll come back later and get it. Maybe there's a bigger box somewhere. Maybe it's shinier. God is not going to punish you because you don't want or you don't come at the same level or the same speed or the same pace. He doesn't punish you. But he will chastise you if you sin. Sure, of course, that's different. Hebrews 12, we know that. But he's not going to sit here and beat you over the head and be like, you need to listen to me. No. If you get lucky and he smacks you in the head like that, then he really loves you because you needed it. He was saving you from something even worse. Anyone else? Going once. Going twice. Okay, there it is.
What are some ways that we can practice courage, like, without taking into consideration all the loud voices in our lives? Like, how do we focus on that courage, if that makes sense? How do you focus on, like,